So just to relate to it, since this was one of the topics for today, I'm just opening my topics right here. So the topic here is discussing the current news in Israel. So to relate to this first topic, all I can say is that in addition to the prayer that we just offered, God protect our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel and help all those who defend them and defend morality and defend goodness and defend democracy, really, at the end of the day, should be completely victorious. All I can say is I do want to squash any rumors of moral equivalence between what the terrorists in Gaza are doing and what the state of Israel is doing to defend themselves. There is no way we can compare one to the other. One is there to destroy and one is there to defend and to build. The terrorists do not hide their intentions. They are there to annihilate the Jewish people, not just the state of Israel, but the Jewish people. And they will do everything, including stealing the millions of dollars that are sent to them, stealing the infrastructure, doing everything that they want to do in order to accomplish that goal. The Jewish people are there simply to live in peace and to defend those who wish for peace and wish for just a simple, healthy, joyous lives for themselves and for their neighbors. I think Golda Meir put it best. Golda Meir famously said that if the Arabs or the terrorists would put down their weapons, then there would be peace in the land. If Israel would put down their weapons, then it would be complete genocide. And I think, I don't know if I'm quoting verbatim, but I think her message is very powerful because her message really goes directly to the intention of why we fight. We fight to defend ourselves. They fight to destroy, annihilate, and murder. So there's no equivalence whatsoever between the two. That, I think, is the main point we have to remember as we speak to our neighbors, as we speak to ourselves, as we speak to our children. That's number one. Number two, I do want to mention something else, and maybe something a little more encouraging, something that might infuse a little more hope, and something that might sound a little more mystical. But I found that it's quite astonishing, truly astonishing, that thousands upon thousands of missiles are being showered onto the inhabitants of the state of Israel. And Baruch Hashem, there are very, very few casualties. Of course, we cry bitterly for every single casualty that we suffer. But still, if we take a look at the grand picture, we see that really it almost doesn't make sense. And it's quite clear to me at least, and to all those who look at this at face value, that God is protecting us. And as the Torah says very clearly in Deuteronomy, that the eyes of God are on the land, upon the land of Israel, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. God protects us, and God protects our people. And there is this umbrella of protection that can, beyond the Iron Dome, of course, can also ensure that our people will remain safe and secure. I know that the IDF and the government of Israel will hopefully do whatever it needs to do in order to crush our enemy. But I do think that we also have to look at God's miracles and in a way connect to God during these tough times, and in a way contribute to this mystical protection by adding our own mitzvah, by adding our own layer of divinity to this world that no doubt brings much protection, safety, and blessing to our nation and to our world. I think with every mitzvah, we create a light that expels darkness. So although we can't enlist in the IDF and fight the good fight as needs to be done, we can at least fight the spiritual good fight. And we can do that again by increasing in deeds of unity, deeds of kindness, and deeds of goodness, and mitzvahs. No doubt that that light that we can create through those deeds can eventually expel the darkness. God is doing his part in ensuring that this light prevails by, again, creating this miraculous umbrella of protection over the land of Israel. But we have to do our part too, mainly indeed, of course, also in prayer and in any other way. Maybe just calling our friends in Israel also, I know, brings them comfort, or finding ways to really reach out and come out of ourselves and contribute to the ignition of this light, this light of goodness that can, Be'ezrat Hashem, expel the darkness. That's really the point, the 2 points I want to make. Of course, I'm happy to hear more questions or more concerns or ideas, but maybe we'll first cover the rest of the topics and then we'll open this up for Q&A. Okay, the next topic is, who are the Jews? Are we religious? Are we the chosen people? Are we here to fix the world? Tikkun Olam. So there are multiple questions here in this big topic. Who are the Jews? So to relate to the first topic, no, we've spoken about this before. No, we're not a religion. I know that there are many religions in the world, from Christianity to Islam to Buddhism and so on, but Judaism is very different because it's not a religion. And I know that sounds astonishing, but the simple proof to the fact that Judaism is not a religion is that if you're not religious, you're still Jewish. You were born a Jew or converted to Judaism, you're still Jewish whether you are religious or not. So obviously we're not a religion. We're also not an ethnic group because we have ethnicities from all around the world. We're not a nationality because if you don't live in Israel, you're still Jewish. So what are we? Rabbi Steinsaltz, I think, put it best. We are one big family that that family comes from the 12 tribes, from that initial family of Jacob and his 12 sons. So we're one family. The converts in our family are related to adopted children and are just as much part of the family as any other biological part of the family. So we're one big family. That's who we are. Now, yes, we do have maybe a religious side to us. That's the Torah, the mitzvot, but that doesn't make us who we are. It just simply provides for us a GPS to know how to behave as Jews and as moral mensches, as moral human beings in this world. But it doesn't, again, define our identity. It does not speak to our very essence, because in our very essence, all we are is one big family. I want to relate to this other question regarding Judaism here, that is that, are we the chosen people? So I know that there's this concept that we are the chosen people, and maybe it has a connotation of also being the preferred people, the better people. But that's not what choice means. We are the chosen people. God calls us the chosen people. We speak about it in our prayer too. Ata b'chartanu mikol ha'amim is one of the holiday prayers. You have chosen us from all of the nations. But what choice really means, if you think about this, and we may have spoken about this in the past, choice means that I am choosing between two identical things. So for example, if I have this yellow piece of paper right here, and then I have this white piece of paper right here, and someone comes and tells me, hey, what paper do you want? And I choose yellow over white, then I'm not choosing. That's not choice. Why? I would call this a preference, not a choice. And I call it a preference because there are many things in me that are causing me to choose yellow over white. Maybe it's my upbringing that taught me that yellow is better than white. Maybe it's my DNA. Maybe it's my social influence. Maybe I live in a culture where yellow is worshipped more than white. So I'm preferring yellow over white almost subconsciously because that's the way I was wired. But a real choice is not a preference. A real choice, if it is indeed a choice, has to be between two identical things. Because if I have two identical things, two white papers, for example, then nothing in me is causing me to choose one over the other. It's nothing is wired in me to choose one because they're identical. That's a real choice according to Judaism. Everything else is a preference. If you think about this, there are very few choices we make in life. You know, when we choose what school to go to, that's not a choice. It's a predetermined preference. When we choose what job to work in, that's also not a choice. It's a predetermined preference based on my social influences, educational influences, my DNA, my biological mechanism. But it's certainly not a choice. It's a predetermined preference. There are very few choices we really make in life. And again, choices are between two identical things. Because then I don't have any predetermined preference telling me what to choose. That's what a choice is. So when we say that we are the chosen people, what we're really saying is that we are the same as everyone else. And God made that choice just because it wasn't predetermined. That's what a choice is. And by the way, there's a hint to that also in Deuteronomy, where God says, "Lakachat lo goy mikerev goy." God took a nation from among nations, not because it's better, not because He preferred it. That was a real choice, just because. There's no reason. There's no outside influence, just because. So we are the chosen nation, but the idea that chosen means better or preferred is simply wrong, because choice by its very definition means that we are not better, means that we are not preferred, means that we are completely identical to the rest. It's just that God chose us just because. Just because. We have to remember that. Because very often it sounds arrogant, and at the in some capacity or the other, it can also create very uncomfortable feelings towards the Jewish people. So we are the chosen nation, but we define choice in a very specific way. And the way we define choice really tells us that we are identical to others. And God just chose us just because. Now He chose us to relate to the last question here. He chose us for a very specific purpose. Isaiah calls it being a light unto the nations. Or lagoim, which may relate to what the final part of this question is speaking about. Are we here to fix the world, Tikkun Olam? Yes, we're here not just for ourselves. We're here for the other. We're here for the world. The Jewish people have a very, very specific mission. And that is to take the Torah, to take the mitzvot, and better the world with it. If we are here to take the Torah and the mitzvot just to better ourselves, then we've missed the point. Unfortunately, I don't think every Jew on the planet understands that. There are many Jews that take the Torah only for themselves. There are many Jews that focus on the world, but have no Torah in it. I think you don't find too many Jews, unfortunately, that know that their God-given mission as a people is to take the Torah, to take our unique instrument, so to speak, and play it for the world, to bring sweetness and betterment to the world. And that really is our grand mission. And I do want to speak a little bit about this mission that is very often referred to as Tikkun Olam, as repairing the world. And I want to add that it's true, but let's not forget that that expression comes from the prayer of Aleinu that says that Letaken Olam b'malchut Shaddai, not just to repair the world, but it's to repair the world with the kingship of God, b'malchut Shaddai, with the kingship of God. We have to take our unique instrument that God in the Torah that we have and share it with the world. We can't just repair the world in order to repair the world. We'll get lost in the world. It's like Mark Twain famously said that some people are so open-minded that their brains spill out. They have no anchor, nothing then to really give to the world. They're lost in that openness. We, on the other hand, have to take God and the Torah that He gave us and repair the world with it. Let's not get lost in the repairing of the world and all sorts of things that are maybe even disconnected from God. Our duty is to stay true to who we are, and in a way to retune ourselves with who we are. And then once we actually find that connection with God in who we are, share it with the world. That's really the purpose of Tikkun Olam, again, b'malchut Shaddai, in the kingship of God. So that's to relate to that topic. Before we get to another big topic here, just maybe a smaller topic. What is the difference between Khabar and Orthodox? So I've mentioned many times, first and foremost, I despise labels in the Jewish world particularly, but for human beings altogether. I think that labels are wrong. I am very careful, for example, as a parent, to never call my children with labels. I will never tell my son he's a bad boy or he's a good boy. He's a silly boy or a stupid boy. I won't, because that's boxing them in a box, in the box of stupid, the box of silly, the box of bad, or the box of good. I believe that my children and every human being are infinite, and therefore they can't be boxed. If I box them, have actually paralyzed their infinity. So it's true for children, it's true for human beings, but it's certainly true for Jewish segments of society. There are, I know, Orthodox Jews and Reform Jews and conservative Jews and renewal Jews, but I think that goes against the very essential belief of Judaism that we are infinite, that therefore we cannot be labeled. What was Moses? Was Moses Orthodox? Queen Esther, was she conservative? No. These are new labels in Judaism. These are labels that never belong to us and should never really belong to us. We are growing Jews. That's all we are. We each have to grow in our own way. But to say I'm Reform and therefore I won't do this on Shabbat, or to say I'm Orthodox and therefore I won't speak to a Reconstructionist person, I think is wrong. It paralyzes our growth. I think it compartmentalizes the Jewish people, divides us, and goes against the very essence of who we truly are as growing Jews. Now, having said that, what's the difference between Chabad and Orthodox? Is Chabad Orthodox or not? So yes, Chabad is observant, absolutely. They follow Torah and mitzvot, you know, the way maybe Orthodox Jews would follow. Hit those labels, but I'll mention them to relate to the question. But of course, they are guided by a very, very beautiful, an ideology I subscribe to, of Chabad Hasidic thought. Chabad Hasidic thought is an ideology that really is based on Chochmah, Bina, and Da'at, which are three Hebrew words that spell out the acronym of Chabad, which mean intelligence, knowledge, and intelligence, understanding, and knowledge, which really focus on our duty to understand God, to intellectualize God, and to make him a part not just of our emotions, but also a part of our intellect, so that we contemplate God and his awesomeness all the time. That in of itself evokes emotions of love and emotions of adherence and connection to God. That's the ideology on one foot that they subscribe to, which maybe makes them a little bit different than the regular Orthodox people. And of course, they have the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was the giant of our generation, as their leader. And then in of itself also adds a whole other layer. So that's to relate to that question. The next topic here is I'd really like to learn about Lashon Hara. There are so many roles in it. Also, what advice does the rabbi have if someone started that type of conversation with us, even when we try to change the subject? So let me just define. Lashon Hara means gossip, or means the evil tongue. That's a literal translation. And it's really based on this idea that we actually read about in the weekly portion 2 weeks ago, where God tells us, Lo telech rachil ba'amecha, that one should not go gossiping among his nation. One should not be a gossip monger. Evil tongue also refers to the idea that I'm speaking negatively about someone else or even about myself. Not allowed to speak negatively about myself. Now, there are many reasons to it. One reason, of course, is because it creates division. It creates animosity, and if we spoke about repairing the world, well, this creates a broken world. That's the simplistic reason. The deeper reason is because negative language creates negative energy, which also breaks the world. Whether we feel it, whether we actually see it, or whether we don't. I've said this many times, but I'm sure you felt this. When you walk into a home, you can almost immediately sense whether this is a home of peace and good, positive language, or whether it's not. If it's a home of good, positive language, it feels good. Otherwise, it feels almost like confining. And that's because words create energy. And that energy creates the light in the world, or God in the home, or God forbid, the darkness in the home. So that's a deeper yet more mystical reason for the idea of Lashon Hara. What does it include? So we spoke about the why. Let's speak about the how. How does one speak Lashon Hara? So Lashon Hara means speaking negatively in the presence or not in the presence of someone else. Now, let me define what negatively means. Negatively does not just mean something that is necessarily negative, but even if it could be interpreted as negative, that also is prohibited. Now, by the way, it does not just relate to words. It could also relate to gestures. Sometimes I make a smirk, and people know that this is a very derogatory smirk. Well, that's Lashon Hara. Or even if I make like a little twink or in my eye or whatever it is, a gesture can also be Lashon Hara. Now, moreover, if I say something positive about another person, but maybe that something positive that I'm saying about that other person can be interpreted as negative. Oh, he's saying something positive. I just heard something positive about this man, probably to hide, to cover up the negative things that they have. They're really negative, but they were just trying to find a good quality. If this is going to lead to a negative thought about someone else, then that's also Lashon Hara. So we have to be very, very careful about it. You know, Socrates, and this, again, we find this not just in Jewish thought, but so he stole it, I'm sure, from the Jewish people. But Socrates would have a 3-filter test. Filter that when people would say, hey, Socrates, did you hear about so-and-so? Socrates would say, well, first I have a 3-filter test. Number 1, is it positive? Number 2, is it the truth? And number 3, is it useful? Many would say, well, if it's not positive, if you're not sure it's the truth, and if it's not useful, why even say it altogether? So we have to maybe go through those 3 filters, or maybe sometimes it's just better to stay silent. Now, what if someone comes, if I am the recipient of such a conversation, like was the question also, then, and changing the subject doesn't matter, doesn't help, then I would leave the conversation altogether. And if you're uncomfortable leaving, then you can explain why I'm leaving. I've done that. Well, I'm going to have to leave this conversation because I don't want to be a part of this negativity. And if people get insulted by that, then let them get insulted. But it's better for those people to get insulted and get the message, hopefully, than me be a recipient to that. Because as the Talmud famously says, Lashon Hara kills, murders 3 people. The one saying it, the one listening to it, and the one on whom it is said. Lashon Hara katil tlitai, to quote the Talmud verbatim, kills 3 people, murders 3 people. And there is no greater murder than Lashon Hara in a way, because when God forbid someone is murdered with a gun, then his body is murdered. When someone is murdered with Lashon Hara, then his soul is murdered, his spirit is murdered. I don't know which one is worse. So that's regarding Lashon Hara. I think these are all the topics. I'm happy to open this up to any other topic. I know there's one right here. Or again, as mentioned before, if you have any questions
I have a question
about what was said, then feel free to ask them too. Yes, Hadar.
Yes. So talking politics, is that Lashon Hara?
It's a good question. I would think so. I mean, politics is a very, very broad subject.
Even if we're the same belief, like let's say I talk to somebody that believes the same way that I believe, and we speak about what's going on in politics. When we speak about it, do we speak Lashon Hara?
Beyond that, let's add another layer. Let's add another layer. The question is if my speech is contributing goodness to the world or nothing, or worse, negativity. My speech can't contribute goodness to the world, then why speak altogether? Almost like Socrates said, right? Is it useful? So maybe there's a question mark on whether it's Lashon Hara or not. But why speak politics seriously? Especially knowing that it's such a divisive topic these days. So I don't know if it's Lashon Hara. I think it depends what subject in politics we're speaking about. Not all politics is Lashon Hara. But I would really think about politics from a different perspective. What's it contributing to the world? Is it going to change the situation? What, now I have the seat of some minister in the Israeli government or in the American government, and therefore I can make decisions. That's not going to change much. I will quote Eleanor Roosevelt, who said that there are three types of minds: small minds, average minds, and great minds. And the difference between the three is that small minds speak about people, average minds speak about events, and great minds speak about ideas. I would say the greatest of minds don't speak at all. They act.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Rabbi, I want to answer what you just said. Like, I have friends that don't know anything about Israel, don't know much about Judaism, and then they're like, "Oh, why is Israel attacking those poor Palestinians?" Well, I'm not going to sit silent. I'm sorry, but to me, would that be considered lashon hara? I mean,
I think that's, that's what I was saying. I think there are educational opportunities.
Educational, okay.
Yeah, that must be actualized and exercised. And I think that people are yearning to know what the truth is. And if I can communicate that, of course, in a loving way, I mean, we have to be careful about conversations that are there just for the sake of the argument and just for the sake of bickering. These conversations are not helpful to anyone. But if people are open and their hearts are open and have an educational moment, a teachable moment, as they call it, then surely it's my duty then to explain what the truth is and what the essence of the of this war is about, as we spoke about at the very beginning. Yeah.
And then I just sent you a question because, like, when I say I go to CBT, do I go to shul, do I go to temple, or do I go to synagogue? Because what is the difference?
I don't know if there's a difference. I really don't know if there's a difference between the three. I would say that I think it just depends on the culture you came from. I mean, I know the German culture called the synagogue a temple. Maybe the Polish culture called the synagogue shul. And the more Anglo-Saxon culture called the synagogue a synagogue. Depends on which culture. I mean, in South Africa, sweaters are called jerseys. So that's the same thing. Two different names referring to the same thing. I was just on a call with, that's why I came late and I apologize, but I just had a whole session in South Africa. It's the wonders of Zoom. But someone asked me, do you diarize it? And I grew up in South Africa, I forgot. I asked him 3 times, what do you mean diarize? What does it mean diarize? And I couldn't even understand what he was saying. Diarize means, did you calendar it? Did you add it to your calendar? So, diary. So it's 2 words for the same thing, same year. 3 words for the same thing. Anything else? Any other question? Please feel free. When I said that the greatest minds are silent, they just act, I don't mean this class. Here you're allowed to speak. You'll still be considered a greatest mind. Yes, Janet.
Rabbi, I'm still a bit confused on this, or whether you're or practice as an Orthodox or Reform, etc., conservative. I'm still a bit confused with. Okay. I mean, a Jew is a Jew. I get that, but I'm confused with if you follow, let's say, the Torah more strict, doesn't that mean that you are practicing Orthodox as opposed to less strict? Right. Where you're not, it just doesn't click with me.
Right. So it's a good question. So a Jew is a Jew. And like I said, I think the only label that belongs to Jews and to human beings in general is whether I'm growing or not. And my hope is that every Jew is a growing Jew. And that's a legitimate label. Now, what does it mean to be a growing Jew? So yes, we have, thank God, we have a Torah that we subscribe to. I was going to say doctrine, but the Torah is not a doctrine. We have the Torah that we subscribe to.
Correct.
And everyone has to pick their part of the Torah that makes them grow. And if I pick the part of the Torah that made me grow a week ago, and I feel like, okay, I need another part of the Torah to make me grow because I'm not ready for the next step, then let them pick another part of the Torah. Now, yes, Orthodox Jews are considered to be observant, which means that they have many parts of the Torah that they incorporate in their lives, in their own personal journey. Now, I would say, though, that as many mitzvahs that they've incorporated in their personal journey as they have, I still think that every Jew has so much to grow, and so much, it's an infinite journey of growth, so much to take upon themselves. So I may think that there are 613 commandments, and although most of them are not relevant today, because a lot of them, speak of sacrifices and commandments that only relate to the times of the temple and so on. So let's say there are about 200 commandments. So maybe Orthodox Jews think that they have 195 commandments incorporated in their lives. Still, beyond the commandments, there are so many more things that Judaism demands, that God demands. It's not just checking boxes, but it's also personal refinement things, or even layers to those commandments. I might check a box that I'm respecting my parents, but I'm really not. Maybe for me, respecting my parents means calling them 3 times a day, and they're not happy if I don't call them 3 times a day. So I might have checked the box saying, yes, I called them today and I'm fine. But once again, that's not for your personal life. It's calling 3 times a day, not just once a day. So not only do we have, more than the 200 commandments, but we also have layers upon layers to each and every commandment that we need to take upon ourselves and grow with. So even the observant Jews, so to speak, still have an infinite journey in front of them. So yes, Orthodox Jews might be consider themselves at least more observant, which basically means that they consider themselves having more mitzvahs incorporated in their lives, but in relations to the infinite journey that they need to still grow in, then they're like every other Jew. Because mathematically, 1 versus infinity or 100 versus the infinity is infinity.
So it's really all, it sounds like it's a lot to do with how you interpret it within yourself and what you do.
Absolutely, it has a lot to do with you. No one can do what I can do. And God created me to be me and to grow as me.
Right.
And
Well, yeah,
why.
I understand that why you don't like label. I get
Right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But people do, different groups of.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Any other questions? Okay, I know someone just wrote, please tell us about your trip. I just came back from Israel. I was there for 4 days. And my main goal was to visit my dear rabbi's resting place. I unfortunately could not go for the funeral, could not go for the Shiva because of this pandemic. Now Israel finally opened up its skies to Israeli citizens. And I have 3 passports. One of them is Israeli. So I took advantage of this opening, thank God, last week, and not this week, because this week Ben Gurion apparently is closed. And I went to visit my beloved rabbi. It was a very, very, there's no word to describe really the experience. I can tell you that it felt as if he was very present. I had a conversation with him. I didn't go to pray. I just went to connect, and I had a conversation with him as I would do during his lifetime, face to face, for a few hours. But I will share with you just this little anecdote, because I think that Rabbi Steinsaltz would want me to share it. because of the message that it conveys. But I went to visit my beloved rabbi on a Thursday morning, and about 20 minutes into my visit at the gravesite, obviously, I mean, I was very emotional and sobbing. But about 20 minutes into my visit, all of a sudden, someone shows up at the grave. Who's that someone? My best friend from high school. I hadn't told him that I was in Israel. Can you hear me? I know we got disconnected for a little bit, but anyway, 20 minutes into my visit, my best friend from high school shows up. I hadn't told him that I was in Israel. He himself didn't even plan to be there that day. He was just in the area. And all of a sudden we meet at the gravesite of our beloved rabbi. He's today a big general in the Israeli army. We were very, very close in high school, and a connection remained very, very intense and close. And it was Rabbi Stern's way, at least that's the way I interpreted it, of saying, you know what, stop crying. That's not what I want you to do. But, you know, grief has its own time and place, but get over it. And now continue on with life, continue on with your friends, and continue on acting. That's all.
Question. I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes. Yes, Judy.
So on that note, that story that you shared, that's a beautiful story. But according to Judaism, do we believe in signs from people who have passed? Are they real? Is it just, you know, whatever makes us feel better inside, or are they legitimate signs?
A good question. Absolutely. We believe in signs. We should be open to those signs. And not only that, but I think that, you know, these signs are not just signs that, hey, I'm still with you, but sometimes it's signs of do this for me. And we have to be open to their message, therefore, also. But absolutely. And the Zohar, the foremost book of Kabbalah, speaks about different types of signs, not just dreams, but flying objects, you know, birds flying, butterflies can be signs. Sometimes it also could be just a simple sensation or a vision. That sometimes is a sign too, but we certainly believe in it. You know, this world and the next world are very much intertwined. And we just have to be open to that fluid conversation between those two worlds.